All right, welcome to the Countertop podcast. This is a podcast where we all kind of bring topics to the table, go ahead and chit chat about them, all over the place from funny, political, sad, random. As you can tell, Juice put on his shades inside. So my name's Brandon. That's Tanner. That's Ray, and we're gonna kind of jump into it. Once again, we are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, all of the other large streaming sites. So please make sure to go ahead and follow us, like us, subscribe, whatever you want to do. Add comments. We appreciate it. So we'll go ahead and just jump into it right now. I'll start with my topic. Kind
Hey,
of.
wait a minute. I got my new sunglasses.
Oh,
That's
that's
what
why
I
you
wanted to
put
talk
them on.
about.
Okay,
Yeah,
little
yeah,
little
I wasn't
housekeeping
thinking.
from last week.
Yeah, so we got in the sunglasses from the ocean cleanup, which is the first plastic that's been removed from the Great Barrier or the Great Pacific trash pile. So got
Nice.
the first piece of plastic. They started off as fishing nets,
Huh.
and
They
so
look pretty good.
Good
they changed
quality.
up as yeah, it's pretty good. A little, and then they actually even did
Was
the
that a
carrying.
was that a location on the bag?
Yeah. So this is the where the plastic was picked up.
Huh.
It says the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, 32 degrees north, 145 degrees west.
That's
And
awesome.
they're actually certified by DNVGL as the first products that carry the certification of plastics removed from ocean.
Huh.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
So, oh.
You said there's a QR code on the side as well, right?
Yeah, and so you can scan those, and it'll take you to your own personal web page showing the details of where the glasses were, the certification, and actually who the can help track through the Lost and Found program. If someone were to find them and curiously enough scans the QR code, they might be able to help get you back to your glasses.
Well, that's awesome. Well, anybody that wants to help out, where can they go find that project?
The ocean cleanup here. Um,
Perfect.
yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will jump into my topic. Kind of world news right now, with kind of COVID cases heading upward in the world. It seems like in quite a few places. The United Kingdom has announced that they're going to be going on lockdown. It was kind of speculated, and then it sounds like from what I've read as of today, Boris Johnson is kind of doubling down that everyone has to pay a price. So I kind of want to get your guys' feedback as we, have gone through kind of our state's lockdowns as they had happened, as well as kind of what's changed since then. Just kind of want to get your guys' feedback. One, do you think this is a good idea? Is it overreaching government? Is it something that just has to be done, and it is something that everyone needs to be partake in just because it's where we're at? We don't have a vaccine yet. Just kind of want to get your guys' feedback. There's
I
a
mean,
lot to this one.
my viewpoint has always been personal health is personal responsibility. There is some societal responsibility in that, I guess, if you really wanted to bring that up. It is, like they said in the beginning, it's good to have a little bit of time to try and flatten the curve, but eventually it's going to get to the point where everyone can't just stay inside forever. I mean,
Yeah.
even when there is a vaccine, there's going to be plenty of people that don't want to get it, people that want to see testing first. So what are they just going to be required to stay at home until they get vaccinated? Or
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, and it is interesting because from my standpoint right now, my particular state of Utah is currently having issues with ICU beds. We're at max capacity, and they're running into issues now with having to identify kind of important cases, important people to help. So from that standpoint, I don't know if that changes things to more of a societal duty that help your neighbor.
it
Um,
does. I mean, I don't have any issue, like I said, trying to flatten the curve or keep hospital capacity to a minimum. But I mean, at the same time, if I was high risk, I would have to make the personal choice not to go out. There's
Yeah.
plenty of people who are high risk and go out and expect everyone else to bend over backwards to make sure that they don't get sick and take up one of those beds when they shouldn't be out in the first place.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. I do. I see it from both sides of things, and it is interesting that and I don't know the case numbers compared to the U.S. versus the U.K. I think the United States is currently higher, but it is interesting to see that stance taken again, just because what has happened it hasn't been positive in a sense of economy, at least, for yes, we may have flattened the curve, but then we're also digging ourselves deeper in a hole that unemployment and the laundry list of things that kind of tie to that. It's we're also digging that way as well, which is a bigger, maybe a longer lasting problem than this virus long term.
There's also no help on the horizon this time, like there was initially. All of the politicians that are currently in the House and Senate right now are doing nothing for anybody. So there's not even a sliver of hope at the moment for a second stimulus. There's probably not going to be until after the election.
Yeah, and that's where my I'm land more on the other side of things, where like where I live, there's rules in place for social distancing, mask usage, and it's I mean the majority of people are following it, and so because the majority of people are following it, we still have open restaurants, open indoor, seating where cases are generally low, um, but there is much more talk about adhering to the rules, even if you disagree with them. It's more that's where the societal thing comes in, saying, okay, we jointly agree that in public spaces and in individual businesses, they if they have the requirement for masks, or if they don't, you follow the rules.
Yeah.
And if those were in place the whole time and those measures didn't lead to reducing the curve, or reducing the infection count, and that was proven to need additional steps in order to have a short term, I think they called it a 1 month lockdown,
Yeah.
to adjust the capacity at the ICUs, or adjust the the availability of if you just say let them all die, the availability of coffins. That you gotta kind of look at it going, if it didn't have a precursor and it didn't have controls in place, and those controls weren't effective, and you jump to a lockdown as no other option, I could view that as being more towards the that's unfair, or that's not very good government.
Yeah.
But if you have the controls in place and the controls are effective, and you went into a lockdown, then I would be very much saying, well, wait a minute, now you're just playing politics.
Yeah.
I prefer preventative measures and adherence to those versus
That's
trying to
basically,
talk about it.
yeah, that is where I would lean. That still has the aspect of personal health as personal responsibility to it, because if you're going to go out, adhere to everything that is required. I think part of the problem in this is that there's so many people out there that refuse to comply just
Mm-hmm.
because it is a government regulation. They refuse to look at any of the statistics and studies and medical reviews and stuff like that that say the preventative measures work. And so you have this huge divide of people that are higher risk and are abiding by things and going out, even though they probably should be staying inside. And at the other side of the coin, you have all of these people who refuse to do anything about it, and then they get it, whether they're symptomatic or not, and start spreading it around and become super spreaders, as the medical term would be.
Yeah.
And I think too that, like, I learned the other day, say I just contracted the coronavirus today. I didn't know about it day one. This is it. After 5 days of having the positive virus, the test is only 55% likely to test you as positive.
Yeah.
That percentage goes up to 97% after 11 days. And so if you look at the term of a month in that context, saying we're bad, whoever has to stop it now, we're not going to know for 15 days if they even develop symptoms.
Yeah.
And from the point, it's likely that after that 14-day period, you're not going to be testing positive anyway. So a month time frame, if it's strict, should be an effective deterrent to case rising.
Yeah.
Just based on facts.
Yeah.
If someone arbitrarily says we're shutting down for 3 months, then based on the information we have now, that would be very excessive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say it's been kind of interesting, as we just had Halloween, um, just
What's
the
going to happen in 2 weeks?
that's kind of what I think right now. I was surprised on how much, in my social media feed, people are at parties and to the extent of being way above like a 10 person,
Mhm.
party, and some of
Thanksgiving's
the,
coming up.
yeah, and
Christmas.
you think about all these, college kids that are going to be going back to their families and grandparents and all of this that you just kind of, it's sad to think about that we can't step back a little bit and, wear a mask. And if you are going to have a party, wear a mask, be social distancing, where you can clearly see from a social media standpoint it's not happening. And
Yeah.
it's sad to see, just, because I think cases in the next 2 weeks will spike. I'm a little nervous here in Utah because I do think with where we're at ICU wise that we're going to see a spike in 2 weeks, and it's going to be where the state is once again put into a position where they're having to make that call of once again going back to lockdown, and
Yeah.
that, it's not good for anybody. But I think that's where we're going just because of kind of the lack of
Discipline.
discipline, yeah, self-discipline, self-awareness,
Yeah.
to kind of realize that some of this stuff is not worth doing, and I know the virus hasn't, it's been so long since this has been going on, but you also have to have some self-awareness of realizing that you could potentially hurt somebody else,
Yeah.
um, government or non-government being in time in you know involved in that's something that you yourself can prevent or not prevent.
Yeah. I think the longer it goes on, the worse it is for everyone. So, I mean, unfortunately, there's so many facets to this problem of people not wanting to comply or people wanting further restrictions and stuff like that. That
It's hard to correct the I don't know. Let's use an analogy of a barge at this
Uncorrectable.
point. Yeah, like a barge. It missed its turn.
Yeah.
It's gonna be hell to get it whipped around. There's no turns. I get it. Go with me on the analogy.
Yeah.
I thought you were gonna go
Uh,
Titanic, but
they missed their left at Albuquerque, and so it's gonna take even if the direction was to turn it towards anything, new policies, it's gonna be slow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. It sucks.
yeah, no, and it will be interesting to kind of see, with the election coming up and all of that adds into this, that possible more protests, possible more cases, just furthering the, in the U.S. at least, and then also from a UK standpoint, what that means and if that helps them or if it doesn't, and new travel bans on the U.S. maybe, and those type of things that could come from this
Yeah.
next few months.
There's a
Right
lot of
now.
countries still that haven't opened their borders, so that's
Yeah.
just going to be extended. I'm sure there are states all over the U.S. that have cases on the rise again, and I'm sure the temperature doesn't help with that.
Yeah.
Since studies have said that there's a certain temperature threshold that the virus won't survive in. Like I'm in Arizona, I have a feeling that that is one of the reasons why cases dropped throughout the summer, and now we're starting to see a slow rise again. It's because the temperature is finally starting to cool off a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you see this week they had the first confirmed case in California of someone with both a positive test for a flu and positive test for COVID?
Mm,
No.
I
Yeah,
didn't see that.
first one in California already. Just they're like, well, what it tells us is that the flu is here.
Yeah,
And you caught both of them.
Yeah,
that is one of the concerns that I saw, though. Part of the reason for lockdown and stuff like that is not only are hospitals going to be inundated with COVID-19 patients, but also typical seasonal flu patients.
Mhm.
So now not only do you have to figure out who gets a bed for COVID-19 related symptoms, but if they have a bad enough case of the flu, now you got to figure out somewhere to put them also, in addition to all of the other emergency services that go on.
Yep. 100%. It'll be an interesting time. I am interested to kind of see if how the UK does with their lockdown. In like you said, Tanner, in all studies, it should lower the cases, but it'll be interesting, kind of the round two of this. That if there's a lot more pushback on this versus the first one.
Well, and they said too that there was a study on Wuhan about how many people at this point the adult population contain antibodies, and that number was less than 4%. And
Jeez.
so, generally speaking, what they're saying is it's about a 3-month term, plus or minus, where antibodies persist in your body to detectable levels. And if you look at the counter argument to herd mentality, right, or the herd immunity, is that, well, that doesn't mean that you won't develop immunities again if infected, that they may just be going to unmeasurable levels and then it'll kick back in because there won't be any variance. Um, Take it with whatever you will. Um, but at least we know that it's not one and done.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
also no studies on long-term side effects on if you get it and it goes away, is it going to cause any further problems down the road? Because it just hasn't been around long enough. So even if we were to go with the herd immunity route and everyone gets it and develops the antibody, that doesn't mean there's going to be no issues down the road with this. So
It's a surprising amount of people I've talked to in a couple different states now, because I was one of the irresponsible ones that went traveling. Um, but there's a lot of fucking let them all die.
yeah.
That's really the rationale that says just get it over with. If you die, you die.
Yeah.
Like, oof. So fatalistic. I don't like it.
No.
No, but it is, when you can't control, it's that self-awareness once again to some degree is you can't control them, but you're having to make adjustments in your life for people that can't also make adjustments in theirs. So I see where it's coming from. I don't agree with it, but I do see where that
Yeah.
conclusion
Even
comes from.
even in that standpoint with lockdowns and stuff like that, there's a lot of people like before that were essential workers that can't, they have to go out. Like,
Yeah.
that's the reason why these other precautionary measures even exist, is because not everyone can just stay at home the whole time. So that's where people need to realize that they should be complying with this in public, because there's some people that just can't, one way or another, stay home even if they're high risk. It's just not possible.
Yep. I agree. Well, we'll jump to one of your guys' topics. That one was a little heavy to start with. Hopefully, you guys have something to brighten the day. I'll let whoever wants to grab the next one.
Go ahead, Ray.
I mean, yeah, mine is not nearly
Come
as
on,
heavy as that.
be heavy, be heavy.
It's not heavy. It does kind of tie into if lockdowns were to happen again, what people would do with their time. But I was mostly just going to bring up, in general, in adult life, outside of changing careers or anything like that, how much learning do you guys do in life these days? Are you picking up any other serious hobbies that would require some kind of learning curve or anything like that? Especially over the last 8 months, if you guys have spent more time at home or anything like that. Just curious.
Brandon?
To be honest with you, I don't think so. It's kind of sad to say because I try to better myself, as much as I can. Part of lockdown, I'm considered essential worker, so I've been working
Yeah.
from day one. And my business type is booming right now, so it's been more of a uh, deal with everything else on the world and
Yeah.
keep moving. So I wouldn't necessarily say I try to learn. I've tried to pick up some new hobbies, and I think, and maybe it's more less of an educational
Yeah.
learning, but I think I've tried to learn how to enjoy nature more.
Yeah. And I guess we can dial it back from my original question. I guess just as hobbies and interests change throughout life, I guess just interested more so in that. A lot of it stems from, like, I bought a 3D printer recently. I have a CNC router on the way, and so I'm trying to learn like different design softwares and stuff like that. And this feels like I'm going to school again and just trying to learn how to do basic designs and basic engineering things like that, trying to get the most potential out of these different devices that I've bought. I don't know why I got into it. It's always something I've been interested in. I just, over these last couple months, I have been working since day one, like you said, but it's from home, so I have more time on my hands, not having to have an
Like 10
45-minute
more
commute
hours a
to and
week.
from
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I kind of picked up on some of this, and it's just been interesting, the learning curve, having no educational background or foundation to go based on. I'm doing the internet learning route, which has gone okay.
You know what I would say is that they have a real interesting TED talk about how long does it take to learn. You know, we've all heard that original saying about 10,000 hours, right?
Yeah.
And that study was originally designed to determine how does one become the professional expert in
Yeah.
something is 10,000 hours. And if you look at the curve, it's actually very, very steep initially. And then there's very incremental gains as you get towards the top of your craft.
Yeah.
And so he did a talk about 20-hour mastery, where if you schedule your learning to be broken down into the core concepts and knowing where to look and to practice to failure within those 20 hours, if they're very structured, that most people can become very good, not an expert, but very good within that first 20 hours of structured properly.
That is,
Um,
it's interesting that the time gap between that, and I think a lot of the 10,000 hours example also has to do, like you said, from a professional standpoint of just ongoing learning as technologies change. Because I know in my couple of different careers I've been in now, it's the same thing. I mean, I was a mechanic before working in the insurance industry like I do now. And so there was, of course, that upfront initial learning, which was about 2 years. I went through a community college program that was partnered with a major brand. But then after that, I was, of course, still learning, but it was much slower time scale because it was just learning new technologies as they came out. So it is interesting to hear that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I and Tanner, you probably have a good example of kind of your work
The
and
VR and
your
stuff like that.
VR that you kind of self taught yourself into that area of learning and just doing. It's probably a really good example of kind of what you had to kind of this question of getting to that point of teaching yourself.
Yeah.
so
So when that started, did you plan on incorporating that into a career or did you start that just out of interest?
the 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 starter story is really kind of depressing. Uh, but no, I was the one. I was a technician out in the field working 80 hours a week, just doing on calls and those kind of things. And so after that ended, and I switched over to management, it really was a struggle to try to find purpose, because you went from immediate gratification of fixing things to long-term gratification and development of people. And then I switched over from that to a corporate support role, and it was trying to find that again. And so I got a little bit better at finding purpose in new ventures, and then I took that. I had both my shoulders rebuilt in a year, so I was out of work for 14 weeks, repairing. And the first round on the first shoulder, I did nothing but play video games. Uh,
I can vouch for
and
that.
yeah, and it was like it was insane amount of time. And by the time the second one rolled around, I realized I didn't want to do that. And so I decided I was going to. There was some talks at work. I had a VR headset at that point, and I just started getting interested into it. But really, because I had nothing but time in front of a computer healing,
Yeah.
I got started into what could I do from this mouse and keyboard without a lot of dexterity. It started with coding using uh, started with A-Frame, which is an HTML based VR, which is really interesting because it uses a C sharp code, but with certain definers that says this is a box, and the box is scalable, grabbable, releasable, droppable. They have these keywords that you're kind of putting in there that encompass a lot of code, right? And so instead of having to write those logic the whole time, you can just drag and drop those. Then Need from work said, no, you need to jump into Unreal Engine. And so then it was, okay, well, what do I need to do in Unreal Engine? It just so happened on this shoulder at the end, there was a game jam. And it was like the guys who I knew who were doing full time development, they're like, we do game jams for the fun of it. And no one loved me. So I had to do one solo. And that's really that putting that challenge out there. And I'll circle back to why I took the long way to get to the point in just a minute. But the reason that challenge drove me to learn how to model, because you need the assets. It doesn't matter if you know how to code. If you don't have a thing, then nothing, it doesn't complete a game.
Yeah.
And so I had some of the worst first 3D models, but I completed the game and I turned it in on time. And I kid you not, Epic Games rated my very first game ever meh. That was it. So it wasn't bad. It was just meh. I was like, all right, cool. It was a tower defense where you were throwing ninja stars at alien kittens as they were landing and trying to attack you, and they kept knocking over buildings. So you just were hucking ninja stars at cats. Um, so the reason that as I got better, got back into work, and through COVID, the challenge was first to create an advertisement through recording, animating, and building. And so I learned it on the fly. I said, sure, I could do it, and then tried to. It was a challenge because I had to complete it. Right now, I'm on the hook. I do find myself, if there is no challenge, very much slacking on personal development. If no one's counting on me to do something, I very much struggle with that drive. And so my approach has always been be the dumbass, commit to something you don't know how to do, and through that you learn. Because you will get fired if you don't.
It's also not
You're
a
not
bad
wrong.
aspect to go at it, because I mean, the self-discipline and motivation is also something I've struggled with just trying to learn this stuff. I've played around with Fusion 360 for like 3 or 4 hours, but that's spread over 6 to 8 weeks. So by no means am I dedicating a ton of time to this, even though I should be. I mean, I've got equipment on the way that I'm not going to be able to use until I learn it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I feel like I've always been the kind of person that tries to be a jack of all trades, definitely a master of none. Anything that pops up, I'm always trying to figure out how to do it myself instead of just farming it out. So I guess my viewpoint is that I have always been trying to constantly learn, but I don't think that is par for the course for most people. So
Yeah, and I think it depends on what's important to you. Like
yeah,
for me, all of my development has not been driven on interest because I'm not an original person. It's always been because I'm going to get fired if I don't do it right.
yeah,
I don't, but it seems to work. I'm sure there's a better, more healthy way to do
Well, but
that.
you're putting yourself in a position that from previous experiences that you kind of succeed at, by doing that. So I think it's your own self kind of giving yourself a challenge that
yeah. It's a form
do
of
it or
motivation.
don't. Yeah, it's a little toxic to yourself, but I think it ends up, you know who you are. So I don't think that's a bad thing, but um, yeah. So I think I may be one of those people right now. I'm so in depth in work right now for my own sake that I haven't even, I picked up a book to read and I got through 5 chapters and haven't looked back at it.
Yeah,
But yeah, no, I try to better myself with things and try to do that. I tried to get involved into the Unreal Engine with Tanner, but that didn't work out too well because of my motivation. But part of this too is this podcast. I think this kind of dives into something that I've always had interest in,
yeah,
and kind of trying to teach myself, some of the software that we've had to use to get to that. So I think there's some there, but I do think you're right that there's probably a lot of people that are just kind of satisfied with where they're at or able to complain with where they're at and don't want to make a change. And I think there's
yeah,
a couple different types of people to get there.
yeah. Or I guess if your hobbies 100% fulfill you, then there's no reason to go out and learn. Maybe part of my personality is just liking to learn different things as a hobby, because I've always bounced back and forth, which can be a good thing, just learning stuff, but also that means I don't usually spend a whole lot of time on a hobby. So it's weird investing all that time and money and stuff up front only for it to fizzle out over the course of a year and move on to something else.
I feel like that's a stereotypical male
Yeah.
from a woman's perspective.
Yeah.
I do
Short
that with
attention
most of my
span.
hobbies.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
you get good at it and then you ditch it.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh, you're
Like
gonna
I
buy
literally
another.
just
You're gonna use that next time.
No, I just actually had a whole Rogue workout, equipment down in the garage, and I just sold that yesterday as something that's just kind of like, it's past, and you just get rid of everything. And
Yeah.
I used to do competitive paintball back in the day. I don't have a paintball like used to have motorcycles. Don't have those. I
Yep.
just, you do a thing, and then I
Move on.
leave it, and
Yep.
whatever.
Yeah. No. I think it's good to try to teach yourself, especially in this time that the world's changing, and I think getting it in tune with yourself is probably a good idea. So finding those things to educate yourself or as
Yeah.
hobbies as well, I think it's extremely beneficial right now.
Yeah. Plus the amount of information that's out there on anything anybody wants to learn these days. I mean, I know if
It's
anyone
ridiculous.
watches any kind of, well, not even substantial, if you just watch YouTube at all over the course of a week, you're going to see ads for Skillshare and stuff like that. It's crazy how much information is out there, both paid and free, on different things you can learn these days, where you used to have a college degree to even get into that kind of stuff, even 15, 20 years ago.
I find that I think that we take a little bit of that for granted
Yeah.
because a lot of that's demographic as well controlled. Like
Yeah.
I know my folks, they're not the Googling type, they're not the YouTube type, and their bandwidth is something they cite as being the reason why they don't, aren't more active in learning or anything. And so they, without internet, stick to television shows. And the
Yeah.
television shows that exist, either they're so broken apart between tutorial series parts, or that's not the purpose of them, right? Like you're
Yeah.
watching a car show and it's really just a long advertisement for a
Yeah.
bunch of things you can't afford.
Yep.
And
It's
then
entertainment.
Yeah.
same with cooking shows and everything like that. It's like, all right, well, now let's use this exotic ingredient you've never heard of. And by the way, I'm using all of my own cooking line.
Yeah.
Uh, so they're stuck looking at those as terms of this is the information I want you to have, where, we're looking at it going, it is everything I'm using is free. And so all that
Yeah.
it takes is time. And so when it comes to like holiday season, I don't know if you guys with your wish list, you're kind of going, well, there isn't anything, right? Like
Yeah.
you're looking at it going,
There is, but it's really expensive.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
no,
That's
Exactly.
my
I do love it
problem.
more. Yeah. But for me, it's like I really just want time,
Yeah.
and I think I'm enjoying that about the working from home aspect is we
Yes.
do have 10 extra hours a week for joy,
Yep.
for that we're assigning it to, whether it's growing our own little gardens for the first time, or paying a little extra care and with your kids, or the extra walk a day, or yada yada yada.
Yeah.
The important thing is we have the availability to reallocate those hours based on what we find interesting, and whether that's through personal development through learning or personal development in soul. You
Mhm.
have several different parts of your sanity that help you keep your pillars, whether it be focusing on body cleanliness, feeling good about yourself, the relationships that maybe you let faltered out, and you want to build those back. I think really it doesn't have to be just for gaining a new skill. It could be
Yeah.
working on another part that's important to you in your development.
Absolutely. That's definitely a good aspect of that. It's like I said, I haven't dedicated a whole lot of time to it, and I think it is just because trying to fill all those other aspects of trying to stay happy and sane and stuff like that through all of this, especially. So
There was like some dude who was in psychology that had it all laid out about it wasn't Maslow with the hierarchy of needs, but it was more about the where does happiness kind of come from, and the different sides of your even spirit is one of them. That doesn't
yeah.
necessarily mean religion, but spirit is a thing on self that
Yeah.
you do need in order to be a happy person. And if you can't, if one's full, you're able to spend more time on some of the other ones that may be lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. Well, we are approaching the 35-minute mark. I don't know if you got a topic you want to share, Tanner, or if we want to go ahead and cut it out.
Yeah, let's go ahead and cut it out because I have not formulated any of the. I had visitors this week, so my brain is moving.
So, visitors were more important than a podcast. Okay, we'll end on that. Uh, no, once again, we appreciate everyone subscribing, following, commenting, liking the videos, listening on any of the streaming sites. Once again, Spotify, Apple Music, two of the largest, and then a bunch of the other ones out there. So, kind of ending on that. We will see you guys next week. Make sure if you're not subscribed or not following or not looking at any of the videos, make sure you do. And we appreciate your time.